how does physical activity play a role in the immune system?
The immune system is, like every system in the body, is affected by physical activity, and for the most part, just like everything else, it's improved by physical activity. But there's plenty of data which shows that physical activity, moderate levels of physical activity, upregulate key components of the immune system. So for respiratory tract infections, for example, when you're physically active, you not only produce more immune cells, like there's natural killer cells, which I love the name, right? You know, yeah. They're naturally killing things in your body. They kill, for example, cells that become infected with viruses, right? Cytotoxic T cells, again, an important part of your immune system, upregulated by physical activity. And not only you produce more of them, but there's compelling evidence that you redeploy them to vulnerable parts of your body. So when you go for a run, not only do you produce more of these cells, but you send them to the linings of your respiratory tract, which is, guess what, where we're vulnerable to COVID, right? To this SARS coronavirus. In addition, physical activity upregulates the humoral immune system, the antibody production. As people get older, their antibody production declines, but people who are more physically active have much healthier responses to vaccines and produce more antibodies. And again, for the same reason. And so by being physically inactive, we directly increase our vulnerability to respiratory tract infections. But physical activity also has indirect effects by making us more likely to be obese, to have metabolic syndrome, to have all the hypertensive, which are all the covariates that increase your risk to disease. So if we're going to fight this pandemic, one of the key ways to keep ourselves healthy is to stay physically active. That said, there's interesting evidence, and there's a big debate about whether too much activity opens a window and makes you vulnerable. And to be honest, there's not a lot of data because there's so few people who do too much that we just don't have a lot of data at that end of the curve. And it's still very debated. So within humans, there's not a lot of really good data, but in animal models, there certainly is. So I cite in the book a study that is really quite an extraordinary study. They gave mice a really virulent form of influenza. And then for the few days while the mice were coping with that influenza, before the symptoms emerged, while their immune system was initially dealing with it, some of the mice were sedentary. Some of the mice, they had them exercise like 20 minutes a day. And some of those poor little mice, they had them exercise like 2 hours a day. And the ones who exercised moderately had less than half the mortality rate of the sedentary mice. But the ones who exercised ridiculous amounts had much higher mortality rates than the sedentary mice. And to me, I think that highlights, what every physician knows, which is that, some is good, but be careful. Don't overdo it because you're going to deplete your body of energy. And then if there's less energy than which in your immune system takes a lot of energy, you could potentially harm yourself. So really, as we deal with the physical problems, the physical health, the mental health of this pandemic, but also just our immune health, staying physically active is just absolutely crucial right now.
Yeah, thank you. That was a really nice summary of the research there and sort of how it helps. I love the bit about grandparents in the book.
Thank you.
And
that's my favorite section.
It was such a wonderful bit to read about. And I wonder if you could just sort of expand on it and why it's so important for us to remember, because many people, I think, as they get older, think that they should actually become less active. And you're sort of saying that may not be the case. Yeah,
this is something we're working on further right now. But to me, I think it's maybe the most important part of the book in a way, which is that we have this idea that as you get older, it's time to kick up your heels and, move to Florida or whatever it is, right? And just kind of be less active and take it easy and, enjoy your retirement. But, humans are unusual species. We're one of the few species that evolved to live after we reproduce. We evolved to be grandparents. But we didn't evolve just to be grandparents, to enjoy our grandchildren. We evolved to be grandparents to help our grandchildren. So if you look in the hunter-gatherer societies and in farming societies, grandparents are out there foraging and hunting and gathering and digging and doing all kinds of stuff and helping out their children and their grandchildren, providing food surplus, helping, being active. And in fact, we have data showing that people often are more active when they're grandparents than when they're parents because they don't have kids in tow, right? And what's important about that, it's kind of like a chicken and egg question, which came first? Living long in order to be active or being active in order to live long? And they're both there, right? And it turns out that physical activity is really important in slowing processes of aging and decreasing disease. Because when you're physically active, you turn on all kinds of repair and maintenance mechanisms, right? So when you're active, you stress your body. You produce reactive oxygen species. You generate heat. You turn up your sympathetic nervous system, your fight and flight nervous system. But then you spend energy after you're exercising to deal with all that, right? We produce antioxidants. We produce molecules to fix all the proteins that we damaged because they got affected by heat. We lower our blood temperature. We turn on our parasympathetic, rest and digest system to lower the sympathetic activity. We turn on all these mechanisms that keep our bodies repaired and maintained. And the trick is that because we never evolved not to be physically active, we never evolved to turn on these mechanisms in the absence of physical activity. We need that stress to mount the anti-stress response. And so physical activity, this is really at the heart of the book. This is why physical activity is so good for us. It turns on all kinds of good processes in our body that keep us from aging and keep us from getting sick. And so as we get older, that becomes even more important, right? You want to keep your muscles healthy. You want to keep your chromosomes healthy. You want to keep your cells from deteriorating. You want to keep the mitochondrial numbers up in your muscles. The list goes on and on and on. And that's why physical activity is so important. So as we get older, it becomes even more important to stay physically active, because and of course the data are there. We know the epidemiological data. We know the mechanistic data, but we don't have this sort of cultural idea that as we age, that's the time to keep up the activity, not turn it down.
Yeah, it's really fascinating how we've evolved to be grandparents. I really like that as an idea. Do you have a few sort of practical tips for people so they can think about and start applying them into their lives immediately to start improving their health and well-being?
Well, I think the tip would vary depending upon the kind of person. So if you're somebody who's struggling to get enough exercise, right? If you don't get enough and you'd like to exercise more, I think that there's lots of things you can do. But I think the most important thing is to find somebody who you want to exercise with. Get an exercise buddy, and use each other to help each other. There's nothing like having somebody who you meet for a walk or a run or whatever, and don't feel like you have to go crazy. Some is better than none, and once you get better, you enjoy some, then you might decide that you want to do a little bit more. But don't feel like there's an optimal kind of exercise, or whatever. Just that you have to do it. Don't make it unfun. Make it fun, and if you make it fun and make it part of your life, and recognize also that your body has to adapt. It takes time. One of the problems, for example, of being obese is that you have less dopamine response to exercise. And dopamine is the molecule that makes you want to do more. It's the reward molecule. And obesity actually downregulates that. And so we have these expectations that all of a sudden you exercise and a week later you're going to feel great. Well, it's going to take more than a week. And you have to be in it for the long term, not the short term. And so don't do it just for the health benefits. Do it for the social benefits. Do it for all the other things. And if you make it fun and part of your life, and find ways to make it necessary, I think that's the most important thing that's the most important tip. And there are so many ways to do that. I, for example, leave my exercise clothes out in the morning when I go to bed, so that when I wake up, that's what I put on. And that helps. It's like it removes one less barrier to starting my run. Because I never want to go for a run in the morning when I start. Never, ever. On no occasion whatsoever. Do I ever.
And how many marathons have you done now?
I just did my 25th.
Well, first of all, congratulations. But that, I think, is so valuable there at the end, what you said, Daniel, that you've had to find ways to remove barriers to that because you don't want to. Yeah, you've just completed your 25th marathon. You don't want to get up and go for a run, yet you are a runner. And
right. And
that's really key, isn't it?
I know there's never been a time when I left the door of my house thinking, I really want to run. I always I'm going to force myself to run. And then I always enjoy it when I come back. Another example is in my building, right? I live in my office when I get to go to it again after the lockdown. My office is on the 5th floor of this beautiful old Victorian building. And every day when I walk into the building, I want to take the elevator. Bar none. I always look at the elevator longingly. But the reason I don't take the elevator is that if anybody sees me taking the elevator, they'll call me a hypocrite. So it's not because I'm doing it for my health. I'm doing it because because I've socially coerced myself into taking the stairs. And I never regret having taken the stairs by the time I get to the 5th floor, but I always regret taking the stairs as I head up the stairs looking longingly at the elevator. And don't beat yourself up for those instincts. Those instincts, even though elevators never existed in the Stone Age, it is a completely normal, natural instinct to want to avoid exertion, and don't ever feel bad about it.
If you enjoyed that clip, here's another powerful clip that I think you are really going to enjoy.
Walking lots materially affects the volume of the hippocampal formation. It gets bigger as the result of exercise, and the functions it supports get better. In a very important sense, you've reversed the functional aging of the brain.